Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Auckland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Auckland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venon condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Osvaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Osvaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, 2 unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed two men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young miner who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, they recruited friends Ronald and Cesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the pre-arranged location. Samadi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadi. It was discovered that Samadi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadi. She stated that Samadi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kelly Clayton. Kelly Clayton, also known as Kelly Stage Clayton, resides in Cotton, New York. Kelly Clayton had a promising life ahead of her. In high school, she was an exemplary student, excelling academically and serving as a role model for her peers. Her academic achievements were impressive, and she passed exams with ease. Despite her academic focus, Kelly's appearance was often described as model-like, and she could have pursued a career in modeling if she had chosen to do so. Following high school, Kelly enrolled in a teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher, which brought immense pride to her parents. However, after a few years, Kelly suddenly lost interest in her studies. It is unclear what triggered this change, but she eventually withdrew from the university and informed her parents that she no longer wanted to pursue a teaching career. Kelly felt that she was too young to be confined to a life of grading notebooks and managing classrooms. Instead, she expressed a desire to travel and experience life to the fullest. Her parents were disappointed and upset by her decision, leading to a 6-month estrangement from their daughter. Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she met Tom Clayton at a party hosted by mutual friends. Tom was immediately smitten with Kelly and began showering her with attention. His athletic physique and attractive appearance made him a standout, which wasn't surprising given his successful hockey career. As a semi-professional player for the Jackal team, Tom was known for his strength and aggression on the ice. However, he realized his hockey career would eventually end due to physical limitations. Tom would have to retire and enjoy the game from the sidelines, either by attending live matches or watching his favorite team on television. They continued with their lives, starting by returning to New York to get married. They then moved to North Carolina, and eventually settled in the small town of Cato, which had only a few thousand residents. Tom started a franchise that specialized in rebuilding houses damaged by fires or disasters. He also worked for a friend's company in a related field. Kelly, on the other hand, had dropped out of university and was working as a waitress. Although she changed jobs, she continued to work even after having 2 children. Tom's income was sufficient for the family, and Kelly could have quit her job to care for their daughters, but she chose to continue working to earn extra money. She used this extra income to buy toys and pamper her children. On September 28, 2015, Tom went to play poker with his friends, the Millers, as he usually did. He preferred to attend these gatherings alone, as playing for money required a certain level of skill and experience. Additionally, someone had to stay home with the children, and bringing the whole family would have turned the evening into a noisy and chaotic affair, detracting from the enjoyment of the game. That evening, Tom was on a losing streak, but instead of giving up, he tried to win back his losses. He suggested that anyone who wanted to stay and play until morning was welcome to do so, but no one took him up on the offer, and he ended up going home. At home, a horrific scene unfolded before Tom's eyes. His wife lay in a pool of her own blood, severely beaten and, at first glance, appeared lifeless. Panicked, Tom frantically searched the rooms for his children. Fortunately, they were unharmed but terrified. He quickly scooped up his daughters and rushed to his neighbor Derek's house, desperate to shield them from the gruesome sight of their mother's battered body. From Derek's house, Tom called the police, struggling to process the chaos. The officer who arrived at the scene found Tom kneeling beside his wife's body, attempting to administer CPR. However, the emergency medical technicians soon intervened and pulled Tom away, revealing the devastating truth: Kelly had been deceased for an extended period, and nothing could be done to revive her. The house was in disarray, with blood covering both floors. The bedroom showed signs of an intense struggle between Kelly and her killer, who carried out the brutal act despite the presence of children in the house. It appeared Kelly had been pushed down the stairs, as evidenced by the broken banister, and brutally beaten with a blunt object until the killer was certain she was dead. No signs of knife or gunshot wounds were found. The officer filming the crime scene observed that Tom seemed lost and in shock. He wandered aimlessly, briefly entering the room before exiting, and was unable to provide the officer with basic information, such as the location of the children's room or the emergency exit. However, when asked about his whereabouts during the murder, Tom calmly stated he had spent the evening at a friend's house playing poker. The officer, failing to obtain clear information from Tom, proceeded to question the neighbor and the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, described the perpetrator as a robber. According to Charlie, she and her sister were drifting off to sleep when they heard their mother scream loudly from the next room. Their mother yelled, "Charlie, run away from here," and then the whole house shook violently. They cautiously left their room and saw the perpetrator leaning over their mother, beating her with what looked like a hammer. They ran back into the nursery, blocked the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. Fortunately, the perpetrator wasn't looking for them, as the nightstand wouldn't have been enough to stop him. When asked to describe the perpetrator, Charlie said he was big, like a bear. He wore blue jeans, a black shirt, and a mask similar to the one her father wears when hunting. Charlie also noted that the perpetrator's eyes looked like her father's, but she didn't remember anything else, as she only caught a brief glimpse before getting scared and running away. Police officers investigating the house couldn't find evidence to support her claim that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at the front or back doors, but the garage gate was open, which could have been an entry point. However, nothing was stolen from the house, including jewelry and cash, and the cabinets were all closed. This was unusual, as burglars typically search every area. Officers quickly suspected that Tom, was involved in the murder. They believed he was pretending to be a grieving husband and had actually killed his wife to collect insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, Tom could potentially receive up to $1 million. The police just needed to gather evidence to solve the case, especially since the daughter mentioned that the perpetrator's mask and eyes resembled her father's. However, the police couldn't find the hunting mask in the house. After discovering Tom's whereabouts on the night in question, the police interviewed the other poker players. One of Tom's friends was incredulous. "You think Tom is the killer? That's unbelievable." His wife was just murdered, and instead of finding the real culprit, you're focusing on him. Another friend, less emotional, chimed in, Tom couldn't have done it. He worked 2 jobs non-stop because he loved Kelly and their kids. It's just not possible. Besides, he was with us the entire night, playing poker. Even when everyone else was tired, he wanted to keep playing. Laura, an acquaintance of Tom's, shared her concerns during a break in the game. She recalled that Tom had asked to borrow her phone, claiming he had left his in the car, which was only 10 meters away. Laura found this odd but lent him her phone anyway. Tom stepped outside to make the call, but when Laura checked her phone's call history later, there was no record of the call, suggesting that Tom had deleted it. Laura discussed this incident with her husband, who had been sitting next to Tom at the poker table. He noticed that Tom wasn't paying attention to the game, instead keeping his head down, focusing on something on the table. It turned out that Tom had his phone with him the whole time, which raised more questions. Why did Tom borrow Laura's phone if he had his own? Who was he trying to call, and why couldn't he use his own phone? After Laura's testimony, the police re-questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and she reiterated that the robber resembled her father. The next testimony came from the niece of Kelly. She explained that she hadn't told her Aunt Kelly about Tom's true nature because she didn't want to upset Kelly. Aunt Kelly adored Tom. The niece felt her truth wasn't needed, implying that it wouldn't change anything. The niece saw Tom as a person with 2 sides. On the surface, he appeared caring and attentive, often showering Aunt Kelly with attention and gifts, and even helping with childcare, which is more than many fathers do. However, his behavior at work revealed a completely different personality. Recognizing her niece's concerns about being young and alone, Aunt Kelly had set up a job for her with Tom the previous summer. During her employment, the niece handled tasks such as correspondence, registration, and managing documents. At first, her interactions with Tom were strictly professional, mainly because she didn't know him well before working for him. One day, Tom got drunk and came to the office, revealing to the niece that his family life was a facade. He confessed to loving his daughters, but not his wife, Aunt Kelly. He had been unfaithful, having multiple affairs during their marriage, and considered leaving her but stayed due to financial concerns. It was later also confirmed by female participants of a poker game that Tom was indeed unfaithful, having relationships with 2 women present at the game. Additionally, Kelly's 16-year-old niece shared information about Michael Beard, another employee of Tom's firm. Michael was doing repair work on houses after a fire, but there were frequent reports of items going missing from the houses where he worked. Tom initially doubted his customers when they accused Michael Beard of theft during fire restoration jobs. However, as the complaints continued, it became clear that Michael was indeed stealing from clients. Additionally, there were allegations of Michael showing up to work intoxicated. When Tom finally confronted Michael about his behavior, he was understandably upset and disappointed. Despite having every right to be angry, Tom took a surprisingly compassionate approach. Instead of simply firing Michael and cutting ties, Tom actively reached out to other companies and recommended Michael for a job. When none of those opportunities panned out, Tom took it a step further and offered Michael work around his own house, doing odd jobs like cutting the grass, watering plants, and making minor repairs. This decision showed that Tom was willing to give Michael a second chance, even if it meant finding alternative employment for his former employee. The detective brought Michael Beard in for questioning. Michael claimed he only stole because he and his family were in dire need of money. He expressed his gratitude towards Tom, his former employer, who had always defended him. Michael also praised Tom's wife, who had shown kindness by feeding him and giving his children old clothes. However, the investigation took a turn when Michael's wife, Holly, was interrogated. She revealed that Tom had offered Michael a job, which Michael had not mentioned earlier, and promised to pay him $10,000 for it. This new information raised suspicions about Michael's alibi. He was called back to the station and hooked up to a lie detector. The test results indicated that Michael was lying, and he eventually cracked under pressure and began to confess. The investigation was sparked by the death of Kelly, which had shaken Michael. He had even attended church to pray for her soul, showing that he was genuinely distraught by her passing. Despite initial doubts about his involvement, the police had released him after the first round of questioning. However, Holly's testimony changed everything. Tom promised Michael $10,000 to kill his wife, Kelly, and make it look like an accident. The plan was for Michael to sneak into the house while Tom was playing poker, strangle Kelly, and then start a fire to cover up the crime. The house was insured for a large sum of money. Michael found 2 cans of gasoline waiting for him in the garage, which he would use to set the fire. He quietly entered the house while everyone was asleep. He crept upstairs to Kelly's bedroom, but she was either awake or woken by the sound of the door. She saw Michael and began screaming. Kelly's screaming startled Michael, and he tried to strangle her. However, Kelly was stronger than she appeared and fought back. A fierce struggle ensued, moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Michael was surprised by Kelly's strength, which made the fight much more intense than he had anticipated. Michael was in a state of shock and panic, flailing his arms wildly and grabbing at Kelly's clothes, unable to focus on the fight. In contrast, Kelly was fighting for her life, accurately aiming her blows at Michael's face. If the police had arrived at Michael's location sooner, they would have seen evidence of the beating he had taken. After a prolonged struggle, Michael slammed Kelly's head into the wall with great force, knocking her to the ground. She was unable to get up for some time. Michael then produced a hammer and continued to strike Kelly's head until she showed no signs of life. Consumed by rage and panic, Michael fled the house, forgetting that Tom had instructed him not only to kill Kelly but also to set fire to the house to conceal the crime. Mark Blanford, Michael's accomplice, was just the driver. Knowing Michael from working together and staying with him, Mark had not been surprised when Michael, known for petty theft, had asked him to drive during a break-in. Mark had mentioned that he had initially wanted to decline Michael's request, but that the offer of $500 had been tempting. After some deliberation, Michael had convinced him to participate. Michael's plan had been to rob a businessman, and he had needed Mark's assistance to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Michael had also promised to help with the car. Mark had eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he could park the car at a safe distance from the house. Michael had accepted this condition. That evening, Mark had waited for Michael in the car in a dark alley, and Michael had come back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling him to move as fast as possible. Michael hadn't had any bag or sack on him, which hadn't looked much like a robbery. Mark hadn't asked him any questions along the way, simply because he hadn't wanted to know anything. He had just wanted his $500, which he hadn't ended up getting. On the way out, Michael had asked Mark to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of there. Mark had stopped there, and Michael had hastily stripped off his outer garments and thrown them off the bridge. Mark had offered to show the place if needed. Indeed, police officers who had arrived on the scene at Mark's behest had found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Michael had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. Tom denied ordering the massacre of his wife, claiming Michael acted alone. According to Tom, Michael knew Tom had money and was motivated by resentment over losing his job. Tom suggested Michael robbed his house, unaware Kelly was home, resulting in her death. However, Laura, a woman who played poker with Tom, revealed that Tom used her cell phone to make a call. The detective obtained the call records, confirming suspicions. The records showed Tom called Michael on the night of September 28 to 29. Michael was tried first and maintained he was hired to set fire to the house for insurance purposes. He claimed he didn't kill Kelly and the blood on his clothes came from touching her dead body. He had disposed of his belongings to avoid suspicion of being at the Claytons' house that night. His testimony seemed convincing. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on all counts against Michael Beard, who now faced life imprisonment. In contrast, Tom's lawyers managed to gather records of conversations and correspondence between Tom and Michael, but none of these clearly mentioned their nefarious plan. Furthermore, the prosecution's attempts to obtain billing transcripts of Tom's movements yielded no concrete evidence. All the evidence against Tom was circumstantial. However, one key detail caught the attention of investigators. The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. Moreover, on the day of the incident, Tom had arrived at the office in his personal Toyota but then switched to the company's pickup truck, which was later driven to Michael's house and left there. The truck was returned to the office the day after the tragedy. This suggested that Tom had, in fact, provided Michael with the car that he and Mark used to commit the crime. It was a crucial piece of evidence that the jury testified to during the trial. The 6-day trial concluded with the jury finding Tom guilty of hiring Michael to commit the heinous crime. Michael subsequently appealed, using the testimony of young Charlie, who claimed that the eyes behind the mask belonged to her father. However, the court dismissed the appeal due to the matching description of the clothing found under the bridge. Consequently, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard were sentenced to life in prison. Mark received a 4-year prison sentence for manslaughter. The custody of Tom and Kelly's children was awarded to Kelly's sister, Kim. With time, Charlie has learned to cope with the tragedy. Although she occasionally remembers her mother, she refuses to discuss her father, whom she will never want to see again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Banaz Mahmud. Banaz Mahmud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmud Babakar Mahmud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Bahman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Banaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Banaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Banaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Banaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmud family. With no support from her relatives, Banaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Banaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Banaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Rameth Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Rameth was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Rameth, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmoud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Banaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Banaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Banaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Banaz regains consciousness, she contacts Rameth and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz moves in with Rameth Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mahmoud family begins to pressure Banaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rameth. Banaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Banaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Rameth was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Rameth and Banaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Banaz failed to appear. Rumeth attempted to reach Banaz Mohammed, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Rumeth, who had been in constant touch with Banaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Banaz Mohammed sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Banaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search of linked to the Mohammed family. Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Banaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Banaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Banaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Banaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Banaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23, the Mohammed family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Hama to enter. Once inside, they attacked Banaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Hama wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Hama couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Hama's admission of being present when Rumeth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Hama was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Hama provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Hama then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Hama revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Hama, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Hama even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Hama began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all three defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "You decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Rahmat Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's 2 sisters. Notably, Banaz's family did not attend either service. Rahmat Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Banaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Banaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his 3rd attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ilana Frick. Ilana Christina Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, to George and Anna, who had immigrated to Canada from Croatia in the early 1970s. She was the younger of 2 daughters, with an older sister named Caroline, with whom she was extremely close. Ilana's birth was considered a miracle by her parents. Her mother, Anna, had faced serious health complications after her first pregnancy, and doctors had told them that Anna would likely never conceive again. Anna and George made a significant effort to ensure their daughter's well-being and meet their needs, in spite of the difficulties they faced. They both worked at a car factory, striving to give Ilana and Caroline a good education and a comfortable life. Growing up, Ilana was a diligent and passionate student. She spent most of her free time reading, also found time to attend dance classes, practice gymnastics, and compete in track and field events. During her summer breaks, Ilana chose to work to help support her family, often working in cornfields and learning to manage her finances wisely. As she progressed through school, Ilana excelled in math and science, and by the time she reached high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. Ilana graduated at the top of her high school class and was accepted into a prestigious medical university. Around the same time, she started dating Matthew Ryan, a classmate from high school who was also studying in the same department. They maintained a long-distance relationship after graduation, with Ilana moving to Ottawa to pursue a residency program at the university. Matthew, on the other hand, chose to work at a local hospital and did not pursue further education. Despite the distance, Ilana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002. They had even made plans to get married, but ultimately decided to remain friends. By then, Ilana was interning at a top clinic and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had not advanced. In February 2003, during a night shift at the hospital, Ilana met Mohammed Shamji, a new colleague. She was immediately drawn to him. Mohammed, who was just a year older than Ilana, was a resident in the neurosurgery department and came from a family of prominent doctors. Mohammed Shamji was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, into a family of medical professionals. His father, Farid Shamji, was a well-known surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a talented psychiatrist. Mohammed's older brother, Ali, also pursued a career in medicine, becoming a medical biophysicist. Both brothers attended Yale University, and later, Muhammad returned to Canada to earn his doctoral degree from the University of Western Ontario. Additionally, Muhammad had taken an interest in a blonde woman, but at first, he did not make any attempts to approach her. Ilana was immediately drawn to Muhammad, a tall, dark-skinned man, and sought to capture his attention. He eventually asked for her number and initiated contact, marking the beginning of their romance. Initially, Ilana perceived Muhammad as a reserved individual who hesitated on dates, jumped between topics, or fell silent, giving the impression of being introverted. However, it was later discovered that his behavior was not due to shyness but rather a lack of interest. Unbeknownst to Ilana, Muhammad was seeing another woman at the time and intentionally kept this a secret. When Ilana discovered she had a rival, she became resolute in her determination to be the only woman in his life. The first year of their relationship was tumultuous, with they breaking up on 3 separate occasions, rekindling. This was largely due to Ilana's persistence in pursuing the relationship. Despite her parents' awareness of the issues and their encouragement to leave Muhammad, Ilana remained resolute, convinced that she had found her soulmate. Ilana often showered Muhammad with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only sporadically reciprocated her affection. Muhammad seemed content to accept Ilana's displays of love without feeling obligated to return them. This dynamic created an emotional imbalance, where Ilana grew increasingly dependent on Muhammad. In the summer of 2004, Ilana and Muhammad received unexpected news: Ilana, unplanned pregnancy. A sudden life-changing event forced them to rethink their future plans. While both were anxious about the news, Muhammad felt a strong obligation to marry Ilana before the baby was born, as is traditional in his conservative Muslim upbringing. In September 2004, they had a 2-part wedding. The first ceremony adhered to Muhammad's family's cultural customs, while the second was a more casual celebration with friends at a popular restaurant. At the time, the newlyweds seemed happy and in love. However, their happiness was short-lived. When their daughter, Yasmin, was born in January 2005, their marital problems became apparent. Muhammad's focus on his career and education left Ilana and their newborn daughter feeling neglected. To make matters worse, Muhammad had been hoping for a son and wasn't afraid to express his disappointment. This marked the beginning of a troubled marriage that would ultimately end in tragedy. After having her child, Ilana took maternity leave to care for her daughter and manage the household. When Muhammad returned home, he would often go straight to his room and spend very little time with his wife and children, which left Ilana feeling abandoned and unappreciated. As time passed, Muhammad's behavior worsened, and he became increasingly critical and abusive. He would insult Ilana's appearance, refuse to eat her cooking, berating and insulting his wife. Despite her growing unhappiness, Ilana chose not to confide in anyone, including her close friends and parents, about her marital problems. However, one day, while Ilana was on the phone with her mother, Muhammad returned home in a bad mood and began berating Ilana in front of her mother. Ilana's mother tried to defend her, but Muhammad shifted the blame onto Ilana, claiming she was responsible for their troubled marriage. Ilana's mother advised her to end the relationship with Muhammad and file for divorce, but Ilana declined, hoping that she could still salvage the marriage. Unfortunately, Muhammad's actions worsened, and he started physically harming Ilana on top of the verbal abuse she had already been enduring. The situation reached a boiling point in the summer of 2005 when Muhammad punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. Fearing for her safety and that of her child, Ilana fled to friends and reported the incident to the police, finally deciding to end the marriage and leave Muhammad for good. Muhammad surprisingly begged his wife, Ilana, to come back, vowing to never physically abuse her again or even raise his voice. He promised that their family life would be perfect, and he would control his temper. However, Muhammad's sudden change of heart was motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to start at Duke University, working towards his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would ruin his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he successfully convinced Ilana to drop the charges against him. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would pursue his studies. Ilana's loved ones were confused when she didn't leave her husband despite the difficulties she was facing. Instead, she moved to another country with Muhammad. When they encouraged her to reconsider, she stood her ground. When the family settled in the US, life appeared more tranquil for a time. Muhammad earned a highly competitive spot in an elite engineering program. Meanwhile, Ilana joined Duke University on a full tuition scholarship. Their relationship grew stronger and became more confident in their decision to have more children. After the arrival of their daughter Fiza, they welcomed another child. Unlike their son's relatively smooth birth, Fiza's delivery was more challenging. The new addition to the family brought immense joy, and they felt grateful for their family growing closer. What secrets lay hidden behind the perfect facade of this family? In the late summer of 2009, Ilana and her husband, along with their children, returned to Ottawa, Canada, and settled back into their home. Ilana, however, soon ended her maternity leave and secured a job as a family doctor at a renowned hospital, quickly building a solid reputation. Her husband, meanwhile, juggled work, studies, and teaching at a university. As social media gained popularity in the late 2000s, they started a personal blog that portrayed them as an ideal family. They shared photos of their vacations, accomplishments in science, and luxury lifestyle, complete with a lavish home. They even posted about attending prestigious conferences and trendy resorts. To outsiders, they seemed like a happy, successful, wealthy, and deeply in love couple with no problems. However, this perfect image hid a dark reality. Behind closed doors, Muhammad continued to exert strict control over Ilana. He monitored her interactions, dictated what she wore, and even checked her email and social media accounts. He openly criticized her appearance, style, and parenting methods, leaving Ilana feeling silent and trapped. As time passed, the tension and aggression between them became stressed, with Muhammad frequently yelling at Ilana and blaming her for their arguments and discord. In 2011, a prestigious medical center in Calgary offered a talented neurosurgeon, Muhammad, a fellowship in spinal surgery. Muhammad accepted the offer and relocated to Calgary, but he had to leave his family in Ottawa because his wife, Ilana, couldn't take a leave of absence from her job for over a year. They had to manage a long-distance relationship. During one of Muhammad's visits home, their relationship faced its biggest challenge yet. While at home, Muhammad accidentally left his laptop open, and Ilana saw a message from another woman on his social media account. The content of the message implied a romantic involvement. When Ilana confronted Muhammad, he confessed to having an affair, which was a devastating blow to Ilana. Ilana's family believed that this was the final straw, and they were convinced that she wouldn't forgive Muhammad again. However, Ilana decided to give their marriage another chance. Muhammad promised to end the affair, and they decided to start fresh in Toronto, where Muhammad had secured a high-paying job. Despite this fresh start, their marital issues persisted. After their move to Toronto, Muhammad expressed his desire to have a son, and Ilana agreed to try again, hoping that a new child would bring stability to their family. In October 2013, they had a son named Marius, a long-awaited addition to their family. Despite the new baby, his behavior towards his wife remained unchanged. Over the next few years, he devoted himself to his medical career, becoming a skilled and respected neurosurgeon known for his ability to tackle complex cases that other doctors avoided. Meanwhile, the wife also advanced in her career, becoming a representative for the Ontario Medical Association. However, the tension between them began to escalate, and his behavior towards his wife became increasingly aggressive. He went beyond verbal abuse, resorting to physical violence against her. During a family ski trip, the wife suffered a deep cut on her arm that required stitches, as well as other injuries. She initially claimed that the injuries were a result of a skiing accident. However, she later confided in her best friend that the injuries were actually inflicted by her husband. Following another heated argument over his latest infidelity, Ilana discovered that her husband, Muhammad, was having an affair with a colleague. After overhearing a suspicious phone conversation, Ilana confronted him, which led to a violent outburst, and he physically abused her. A friend, who was aware of the situation, advised Ilana to end her marriage, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Ilana should retaliate by having an affair of her own. Although the suggestion was made in jest, Ilana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her unfaithful husband. During the summer of 2016, their relationship continued to deteriorate. Their children were away at camp or staying with their grandparents, leaving Ilana and Muhammad to face their marital problems alone. In a surprising turn of events, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary in early September, even sharing the news on social media. However, their happiness was short-lived, as they began discussing divorce just a week later. Despite his marital transgressions, Muhammad refused to acknowledge his actions as grounds for divorce, claiming that he was happy with his current situation. On the other hand, a desperate Ilana initiated an affair with a coworker who had been flirting with her, escalating their relationship turmoil. Elena found herself swept up in a new romance, feeling cherished and adored by her partner. This was a welcome change from her current situation, and she reveled in the long-absent sensation of being loved and desired. However, her personal life was about to take a dramatic turn. A fierce argument erupted in the family on November 25, 2016. Elena informed her husband that their divorce was unavoidable. The following day, she consulted with a divorce attorney and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. While Elena was away, her husband, Muhammad, sent her a series of messages, begging her to reconsider and work on saving their marriage for the sake of their children. Elena returned home on November 30th and made a final phone call to her parents. Although her voice betrayed some anxiety, she reassured them that everything was okay. Unbeknownst to her family, Elena had attempted to call the police that evening, but in her distress, she accidentally misdialed the number, leading to a devastating outcome. On December 1st, Anna tried to contact her daughter Ilana but was unable to reach her. Concerned, Anna called her son-in-law Muhammad to ask what was wrong. Muhammad claimed that Ilana had packed her bags in the middle of the night and left him and their children to be with her lover. However, Anna and her husband were skeptical of Muhammad's story, knowing that their daughter would never abandon her children. They asked a close friend of Ilana's to keep an eye on the Muhammad home while they traveled to Toronto to report Ilana's disappearance to the police. The friend reported that Ilana's car was still parked in the driveway, which only added to the family's concern. When Anna and her husband arrived at their daughter's house, they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. However, Muhammad was agitated and insisted that Ilana was with her lover, repeating the same story he had told the police earlier. After Ilana was reported missing, a shocking discovery was made. The police found a body inside a suitcase. A man walking his dog by the river on December 2nd noticed a new-looking suitcase under a bridge about 24 miles from the suspect Muhammad's home. His curiosity got the best of him, so he opened the suitcase, discovering the body of a blonde woman. The police were immediately notified, and the body was taken to the medical examiner for identification and analysis. Fortunately, identifying the owner of the suitcase was not difficult because the perpetrator had left the luggage tag attached, which still had her name and travel information from her recent trip. Her parents confirmed the identity as Ilana. An autopsy revealed her cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. Additionally, her body showed signs of abuse with multiple bruises and abrasions. Notably, the victim was found dressed in pajamas with no shoes. Considering the victim's position in clothes, it appears she was placed inside the suitcase immediately after her death. The investigation led to the suspect's arrest later that evening at a coffee shop. Evidence indicated he was planning to leave the country. A lawyer accompanied the suspect during his meeting at the time of arrest. However, law enforcement thwarted the escape. Subsequently, Muhammad, the prime witness turned suspect, was arrested, formally charging him with Alana's first-degree murder. Muhammad denied any involvement in the incident, but a disturbing detail soon came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unintentionally witnessed her mother's murder. Yasmin reported hearing screams and noise coming from her parents' room, prompting her to rush there. She opened the door slightly and saw her father kneeling behind the bed, while her mother was likely on the floor, out of her sight. Muhammad ordered Yasmin to leave the room immediately, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told his daughters that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had occurred, but she couldn't fathom that her father was responsible for her mother's death. To avoid putting his daughter through the trauma of testifying in court, the accused confessed to the crime. He recounted the events of that fateful evening, stating that he and his wife had argued over her alleged infidelity and desire for a divorce. Muhammad claimed that he didn't intend to harm his wife, but the situation escalated rapidly. The argument turned violent, and when his wife tried to call the police, he knocked the phone out of her hand. She began screaming, and Muhammad struck her multiple times in the face before pinning her to the floor and strangling her with his hands. Muhammad's daughter entered the room, but couldn't see what had happened behind the bed. By the time Muhammad realized his wife was not breathing, it was too late. In a desperate attempt to revive her, he made a fatal mistake, breaking her neck. Panicked, he placed her body in a large suitcase and drove around for hours, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he stopped at a small bridge over a river and threw the suitcase into the water, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation, hidden in the darkness. During the trial of the surgeon, a scandal emerged involving his father, Ferd Shamji. The elderly man made derogatory comments about his deceased daughter-in-law, trying to justify his son's actions by claiming she had been unfaithful and provoked him. As a result, his medical license was revoked. Muhammad was found guilty of second-degree murder in April 2019 and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he may be eligible for parole in 14 years, considering the time he served during the trial. This means he could be released as early as 2030. Additionally, Muhammad was prohibited from contacting his children or his wife's parents and was ordered to pay them a substantial amount of compensation. His medical license was also permanently revoked, preventing him from practicing medicine or teaching again. The children who have lost their parents are now being cared for by Alana's parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela to parents Andrina Bermudos Milian and Leonardo Salazar. Her mother was from Machorina, Minagas, while her father was from Tucupito, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year later, in September 2016, the family decided to move to Ecuador in search of a better life. However, their new life in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, was short-lived. Just a month after their arrival, the relationship between Andrina and Leonardo began to deteriorate due to various reasons. They eventually broke up, and Andrina decided to move to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. A mother's friend kindly offered them temporary accommodation while they settled and found work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito in Venezuela. After spending some time, Leonardo decided to move to Trinidad and Tobago. At that point, Leonardo had already been dealing with a long-standing disability resulting from a serious motorcycle accident that occurred during his youth, which had left his left arm completely unusable. Leonardo struggled to find decent work due to his physical limitations. After Andreina moved to Cuenca, she almost completely stopped communicating with Leonardo, only informing him once that she had taken a job on a farm in Tapacundo. Some months later, Andreina formed a romantic bond with Washington Andreas Aymaro. Interestingly, Andreas happened to own the same farm in Tapacundo where Andreina was employed. When Paula was around 18 months old, Andreina moved in with Andreas, bringing Paula with her. Later, on April 7, 2019, Andreas and Andreina had a child of their own. The arrival of the new baby brought immense joy and unity to the family. Life was going smoothly for the family, with the farm thriving and everyone enjoying each day. However, their happiness was short-lived. On March 27, 2020, a life-altering event occurred, changing the course of their lives forever. On that fateful day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations. During the car ride, Paula suddenly became ill, feeling dizzy and nauseous. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom, where Paula vomited again. He decided to leave her alone for a few minutes to retrieve a change of clothes from the car, as Paula's clothes were soiled. When Andreas returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out and attempted to administer first aid before rushing her to the hospital. However, by the time they arrived, Paula had already passed away. The doctors who examined her body noticed that Andreas' story didn't add up. They found bruises on Paula's body and face that couldn't have been caused by the events Andreas described. As a result, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived soon after and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. The autopsy later revealed that Paula's death was not an accident, contradicting Andreas' claim that she had drowned in the toilet bowl. The autopsy results revealed that she had been dead for approximately 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting the foster father's claim that he had administered first aid and CPR just 20 minutes prior to hospitalization. The autopsy also showed that she had suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. Paula's death was initially reported as an accident, but an examination of her body revealed numerous injuries, both old and new. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, did not learn of her death until 33 days after it occurred. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andreina began a new relationship and severed all ties with him. As a result, Leonardo was unaware of Paula's tragic fate for 3 days. During this time, he could only keep up with Paula through photos sent to him by Andreina and their mutual friends. Leonardo learned of his daughter's death. But Andreina's family told him a different story, claiming Paula had died from -19 complications. During this time, Ecuador was under quarantine due to the pandemic, like the rest of the world. But unusually, there were very few -19 deaths in the country. Leonardo was naturally skeptical about his daughter's alleged cause of death and quickly began researching Ecuador's -19 mortality statistics, which were publicly available on social media. Leonardo reached out to Andreina every day for 10 days, but she didn't return his calls until he'd been trying to contact her for almost 2 weeks. When they finally spoke, Andreina told him that Paula had died from -19, but she claimed her lawyers wouldn't allow her to share more information. On the same day she contacted Leonardo, she visited the morgue to begin making arrangements for her daughter's funeral. Despite a prosecutor requesting more time to examine the body, the funeral proceeded on April 10, 2020. Andreina refused to allow a second autopsy to be performed. Through social media and friends, Andreina's friends contacted Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's difficult life in the years before her death. They provided Leonardo with the details they had gathered, which included recordings of conversations, photos, audio recordings, and other similar evidence. According to witnesses, Paula faced mistreatment not only from her stepfather but also from her own mother. Observers reported that Paula was only seen happy when she played alone around Andreas, suggesting that her distress occurred during interactions involving multiple individuals, especially when Andreas was near Andrina. Typically, Paula appeared depressed, acted shyly, and became easily startled. She eventually confided in acquaintances that her mother and stepfather physically punished her for misbehaving. She further revealed that Andreas once pushed her as punishment, causing her to hit her head against the wall. She expressed her deep-seated fear of Andreas by calling him a monster. Paula was plagued by nightmares and struggled with insomnia. When she moved into her Andrina's home, her parents initially required her to sleep alone, ignoring her cries when she had trouble falling asleep. They also refused to help her get tucked into bed, leaving her to do it on her own. Furthermore, her mother, Andrina, had begun teaching her how to cook at an unreasonably young age. Paula was forced to prepare her own breakfast and dinner, as her mother preferred to sleep in late and take breaks from childcare in the evenings. Andrina seemed unconcerned about the dangers of having a preschool-aged child cook for herself, despite the risks involved. This neglect was part of a larger pattern of indifference towards Paula's well-being, as Andrina simply did not want to care for her daughter. A young girl repeatedly complained of pain in her legs and back to her teacher, claiming she couldn't walk. Due to her persistent complaints and visible bruises, the teacher took her to the school's health center. After an examination, doctors suspected she was being mistreated at home. The teacher contacted a special police unit to investigate her family for potential abuse. Authorities took up the case and temporarily relocated she to a safe location while the investigation was ongoing. On October 16, 2019, she, Paula, was temporarily placed with her uncle, Andrina's brother. A court hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were set to testify failed to appear. As a result, the hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020. Unfortunately, the teachers didn't show up again, and the court was forced to drop the charges against Paula's parents. With no evidence, Paula was returned to her mother. Tragically, 1 month later, on March 27, she passed away. Following Paula's death, Andreas was initially placed in protective custody during the investigation. However, he later appealed this decision, leading to a court hearing on June 12, 2020. During the video conference hearing, the judge set a restraining order and decided that Andreas could be released to house arrest. Yet, in a surprise move, Andreas dropped his appeal. Meanwhile, Leonardo was running a social media campaign and sought financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador, with the goal of filing a complaint against Andrina, Paula's mother, before it was too late. At the time, Andrina had not been charged and was free. Leonardo was fortunate to receive financial assistance and free legal advice from two kind-hearted Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. To reach Ecuador, he had to take a perilous journey from Trinidad to Venezuela, crossing the border by raft and then continuing on to San Cristobal. Leonardo started his journey into Caira and entered Colombia, then traveled through rugged terrain to reach Ipiales. From there, he made his way to the Rumicaca Bridge, which marks the border with Ecuador, and eventually arrived in Quito, where he met with a lawyer on June 30th. Meanwhile, a formal complaint had been filed by Leonardo against Andrina, and as a result, Andrina was charged on July 6, 2020, and was subsequently put under house arrest. Andrina and Andreas were charged with murder, an offense that carries a maximum prison sentence of 13 years. In November 2020, Leonardo's lawyer raised concerns about the possibility of Andrina fleeing the country due to a past incident where she attempted self-harm. As a precaution, the judge ruled in favor of fitting Andrina with an electronic monitoring device, reducing the need for her to attend court hearings twice a week, making them only once a week instead. Andreina later asked the judge to reconsider the decision to wear an electronic monitoring device. A second hearing was held on November 16 to consider this request. Despite these delays, the judge eventually scheduled a trial for December. Due to the pandemic dominating the news, some key events were not reported. The trial began on January 14, 2021, with Andreas being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was closed to the public and no media representatives were present. Some participants joined via video link. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had suffered severe and brutal injuries, including damaged spinal discs, broken ribs, and previous fractures that had healed. However, the infection that caused her death was a result of injuries she sustained later on. The report also confirmed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her injuries indicated extreme cruelty and brutality. Additionally, the autopsy showed that Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and deficient in essential minerals and nutrients, with her physical condition being significantly worse than expected for her age. Paula's mother, Andreina, dismissed the severity of Paula's injuries and instead implied that Paula's issues were psychological and that she hurt herself intentionally to seek attention. Andreina attributed the change in Paula's behavior to her feeling neglected after her brother was born. Just a few months after Leonardo left Ecuador in 2017, she began to experience abuse. It is likely that the abuse started immediately after her mother, Andreina, started a relationship with Andreas. Over 40 witnesses testified against Andreina and Andreas, confirming that Paula suffered abuse for at least 3 years. At the final hearing before the verdict, Andreina took sole responsibility for the abuse, claiming she was the one who hit Paula with a belt in her fists. She claimed Andreas was innocent and had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also stated that she punished Paula for causing problems in her relationship with Andreas. The judges were concerned about Andreina and Andreas' newborn son, but it was clear that the child had not been abused like Paula. Andreas has chosen to remain silent about the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. The trial for Paula's murder was concluded, and both defendants were found guilty. The maximum sentence for this crime is 13 years, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula was only 4 years old and unable to defend herself. As a result, the judge sentenced they to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamont Springs, Florida. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, an older brother, and a younger sister. Her father worked in construction and often traveled to other states for work, so her mother mainly took care of her and her siblings. Throughout her childhood, Jessica was a cheerful and active girl who loved playing outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family planned to visit her grandparents for Easter. While her mother packed for the trip, her father went to the store to buy some vacation items. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard to wait for her father to return. Her mother agreed but told her to stay in the yard and not wander off. The family's apartment complex was located in a quiet area, surrounded by many trees and away from the main road. The neighborhood was considered safe, and children often played outside without regular adult supervision. However, when Jessica's father returned home around 6 p.m., he asked his wife where Jessica was, and she was surprised to learn that Jessica was not in the yard as she had thought. The parents searched the yard but couldn't find their daughter Jessica. Growing increasingly worried, they started asking neighbors if they had seen Jessica. A neighbor reported seeing Jessica sitting on a bench, reading a book, but this information yielded no results. As night began to fall and Jessica was still missing, her parents contacted the police. The police quickly began search operations, questioning neighbors and canvassing the surrounding area. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to find Jessica, forcing the police to expand their search to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The caller's voice was distorted by background noise. But the police determined that Jessica might have been near a water pumping station several miles from her home. When the police arrived at the water pumping station, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Jessica's body was discovered near the pumping station, hidden in a black trash bag. This location was only a few meters from the road, but the pumping station was located under a bridge, making it nearly impossible to detect. Next to the body were some magazines and a children's mirror. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner for further investigation. Investigators turned their attention to tracing the 911 call, which they believed was made by the killer. Their goal was to use the call to identify the killer. However, the call was made from a public phone at a nearby gas station, and when the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled. Detectives tried to take fingerprints, but it was a difficult task because this was a public phone booth, which likely had many fingerprints from different users. In addition, it was possible that the killer had wiped the phone clean after calling or had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Jessica may have been killed elsewhere and her body moved to the water pumping station. Evidence on the ground showed that the killer pulled the body out of the car, then put it in a trash bag and dragged it to the water pumping station. Jessica's clothes were still intact, except for a missing shoe, which was not found at the scene. The only potential clue at the crime scene was tire tracks on the ground. There was a possibility that they belonged to the killer's car, so the police took photos and analyzed the prints. Meanwhile, a medical examination of the body showed that the victim died from strangulation, with marks on the face and neck indicating the killer used bare hands. An autopsy showed that Jessica had eaten a hamburger shortly before her death. Her mother said she did not give Jessica a hamburger that day, suggesting the killer may have provided her with food. Additionally, forensic experts found no evidence of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unknown. Initially, police had suspected Jessica's parents of being involved in her disappearance because they had not had a solid alibi. Jessica's mother had claimed that she had packed up the apartment, and her father had claimed that he had been out shopping, so they clearly had had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police had been confused as to how the killer had been able to get Jessica out of the yard without anyone noticing or her screaming, leading them to believe that the killer might have been someone Jessica knew and trusted, and she might have voluntarily left with them. The killer's voice on the 911 call had provided another clue. In the recording, experts had detected feelings of grief and remorse, suggesting that the killer had truly felt remorse for his actions. The fact that the killer had taken the risk of calling 911 suggested that they might have been trying to minimize guilt or manipulate the investigation. However, the obvious sadness in the killer's voice had led investigators to believe that the killer had likely been remorseful for his actions. The investigation had reached a turning point when police had found a roll of black garbage bags in the trunk of Jessica's father's car, similar to the bag used to dispose of the victim's body. However, expert examination had shown that the bags had come from another manufacturer, eliminating Jessica's father as a suspect. The focus of the investigation had then turned to other suspects. Forensic experts had conducted a thorough examination of the victim's clothes and body, thereby obtaining many clues. One notable discovery had been that there had been a significant amount of dog hair on Jessica's clothes, even though her family had not owned dogs. This suggested that the dog hair might have come from the perpetrator's dog. Additionally, human hair of an unidentified man had been found on Jessica's body, and experts had been working to extract the DNA profile from the sample. However, this process had taken several days. Further examination had revealed two strange fibers on Jessica's clothes that experts had analyzed and determined likely had originated from car seat covers and carpets. This finding had supported the theory that Jessica had been killed at a location other than the water pumping station and then transported there by car. To determine the breed of dog that had shed hair on Jessica's clothes, experts had used the FBI's specialized database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from many different dog breeds. By comparing fur samples with a database, experts had determined that the fur had belonged to a Shar-Pei. This discovery had suggested that the perpetrator might have owned the Shar-Pei and that the dog's fur had been transferred to Jessica's clothes at the perpetrator's home or in the car. According to investigators' initial theory, the killer might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to buy hamburgers at McDonald's, and then taken her to his home, where she had been murdered. To aid the investigation, experts had tried to improve the quality of the phone call recordings, but this had proved difficult. They had decided to try a different approach and sought help from NASA, which had advanced audio enhancement tools originally designed for use in space recordings. NASA had agreed to assist and provide police with higher quality audio. However, experts still needed to sample the suspect's voice to compare with the call recording. Detectives had suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, so they had played the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize the voice. At first, she had said the voice was familiar but couldn't place it. When she had heard it a second time, she suddenly had realized that the voice belonged to a neighbor who had lived in their complex. Although she couldn't remember his name, she had told detectives that he often had taken his Shar-Pei for walks in the yard. Police had quickly identified this man as James Crow, 35 years old. Hours after Jessica had disappeared, investigators had questioned her neighbors, including James Crow. James had told them that he had seen Jessica in her yard while walking his dog, Pumpkin, a Shar-Pei. They had exchanged a few words and then he had left. Detectives had looked into his past and had found no history of criminal activity. He used to be a truck driver, but had been currently unemployed and had spent most of his time walking around the neighborhood with his dog. Detectives realized that the similarity in voice and breed of dog had not been enough to arrest James, so they obtained a search warrant for James' car. Inside, they found two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, they discovered an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious because James had no children and Jessica had had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach. Additionally, the car had brand new tires that had barely been used, which James had claimed to have changed on the day Jessica was murdered. However, his previous tire had not been very old and could have lasted a few more years. Police investigated further and discovered that one of James' old tires had been left behind at an auto service. When they compared the tire tread pattern to prints found near Jessica's body, they did not match. However, it was possible that tire marks on the ground did not belong to the killer's car but to another vehicle. Police also searched James' apartment, where they found a box containing several rolls of trash bags similar in size and color to the one found on Jessica's body. To determine if there was any connection between the bags, detectives needed to find a way to prove that they had come from the same manufacturer. At first, this seemed impossible, as the bags had no distinctive markings or features and there were hundreds of manufacturers of similar products. The detectives had an idea to solve this problem. They contacted Roberts, a quality control specialist for the company that had manufactured the bags found in James' apartment. Roberts pinpointed the factory that had produced the bags based on a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. The code indicated that the product had come from a facility in Virginia. Roberts explained that a small amount of iron or titanium was added to the bag's composition, depending on its color. Because the factory produced bags in many different colors, the materials used in production changed constantly, causing the ratio of plastic and iron or titanium to change daily. To take advantage of this information, experts used high-intensity X-rays to measure the presence of iron and titanium in the plastic of handbags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene. This analysis provided exact ratios of elements, which were identical in both bags. This suggested the bags had been made on the same day and possibly from the same batch. However, there was more to the story than that. During the production of garbage bags, microscopic debris accumulated on the machine and imprinted on the plastic sheets as they were rolled out. This created a unique stripe pattern on each bag, visible to the naked eye. Even though the debris on the conveyor belt was constantly changing, creating a new pattern every few hundred feet of fabric, the results were consistent enough to provide another possible lead in the investigation. The similarity of the bags suggested that not only had they been produced in the same batch, but they had also been produced within a short time frame, perhaps just a few hours apart. Comparison of the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene revealed a striking match in the lines and patterns on the bags. On further inspection, experts showed that the bags had been rolled into bundles by machine, which could have created irregularities during the rolling process. Although these irregularities were hardly noticeable, they could be detected by examining the edges of the bag, where the folds formed a unique pattern. Upon re-examining the bags, experts discovered that the pattern on the bags at the suspect's apartment matched the pattern at the crime scene. Further analysis also revealed that fibers found on Jessica's clothing had matched the carpet in James' apartment and the upholstery of his car seat. An audio expert had also analyzed the 911 call recording and compared it to James's voice sample, concluding that the voice in the recording belonged to James. Although the evidence was only circumstantial, detectives still believed in James' involvement in the case and decided to arrest him. James was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Despite James continuing to deny guilt, the case still went to trial. The prosecution presented its theories, highlighting James' frequent outdoor activities with his dog, which had earned him the trust of local children, including Jessica. According to police, James had met Jessica while walking his dog and had struck up a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, and she agreed because she knew him. After the meal, James allegedly invited Jessica to his home. While his wife was away, evidence had shown that Jessica was actually at James's house that day, as fibers from his living room carpet were found on her clothes. The investigation revealed that James might have tried to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Forensic evidence indicated that the killer had strangled Jessica with their bare hands and pressed their palms against her face, possibly to silence her if she tried to scream. Panicked, the killer then placed Jessica's body in a trash bag and transported it to their car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. The killer dumped her body near a water station, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's attorneys attempted to defend the evidence, arguing that there was no concrete proof of James' guilt. Although the judge accepted the evidence, the defense pointed out that in murder cases, the standard of proof is higher and more direct. Therefore, the possibility that James could avoid the death penalty was very large. A plea agreement was offered to James based on the circumstances surrounding the case. The deal required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. 2 years after the murder, in the summer of 1998, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details about the crime, he said that one of the reasons he accepted the deal was to spare Jessica's family the torment of the trial. The prosecution believed James showed genuine remorse for his actions and used the 911 call as evidence. The purpose of the call was unclear, but it suggested James was trying to alleviate his guilt. However, Jessica's parents were not satisfied with this deal because they had hoped for the death penalty and wanted James to confess to the crime. Despite this, James remained silent about the details of his actions. James did not fully serve his sentence. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49 from health problems, taking with him details of his crimes and motives. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression. This challenging time in him the value of hard work and the importance of money, as he learned to appreciate every dollar he made. His family struggled financially, which likely motivated him to become determined and ambitious. Dale married Glee Michelle, a multi-talented woman, who worked as an elementary school teacher, a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. They had 2 children, Tiffany born in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable life, including a home in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Peraro Dunes, luxury cars, and designer clothing. After serving in the Air Force, Dale became a successful businessman. He eventually became the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that sold small aircraft. The primary source of the Ewell income came from selling light aircraft and investing heavily in the stock market. After establishing a successful aviation business, Dale expanded into buying several farms, accumulating substantial wealth. Together, Dale and Glee were worth an estimated $8 million, embodying the American dream. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly. Their children chose different directions in life. Tiffany pursued a similar career to her parents, whereas Dana chose a distinctly different route. At university, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, falsely claiming to be the source of his family's wealth. This fabricated story gained attention from a local newspaper and was even included in his school yearbook. In 1990, while attending Santa Clara University, Dana was fixated on wealth and luxury. He owned a BMW and had access to funds, allowing him to indulge in expensive items like jewelry. From a young age, Dana had a habit of lying and making up stories. Despite being intelligent and well-educated, Dana's ambitions went beyond comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He had the same ambitions as his father, but he didn't have the drive to achieve them in a proper and lawful way. Dana began fabricating elaborate and false stories about his accomplishments and importance while he was a student at the University of Santa Clara. He lied to both faculty and peers, claiming he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. His false narrative included starting as a stockbroker at 18, moving to aircraft sales, and eventually becoming president of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The tension between Dana and his father, Dale, was largely unknown to others. Dana's tall tales may have caused his father embarrassment and contributed to their conflicts. Despite Dale's humble beginnings and generous support for his children, Dana seemed to have an excessive sense of entitlement. Dana Ewell presented himself as excessively self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing his wealth and social standing above all else. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, the weather in Sunnyside, California was mild with partial sunshine, resulting in a pleasant afternoon. Dale, 59, spent the Easter weekend at his beach house with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany. Glee and Tiffany returned to their home in Sunnyside by car, while Dale flew his private plane to his hangar and then drove home. When they arrived, they were ambushed. Tiffany was shot in the head and killed, followed by Glee, who was shot multiple times. The killers stayed in the house, waiting for Dale to arrive. 30 minutes later, Dale arrived home and was also fatally shot as he entered the house from the garage. 2 days later, Dana, the youngest member of the family, tried to contact his parents but was unable to reach them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. On April 21, 1992, the family's housekeeper, Juanita, arrived at the house for work and found Tiffany's body lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Juanita was distraught and sought help from a neighbor, who called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California. At the time of the murders, Dana was contacted by the authorities. His girlfriend's father quickly arranged for him to fly to Fresno, and Dana was visibly upset during this time. The police then started a thorough investigation, spending many days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was made to look like a robbery. However, experienced detectives believe the scene was deliberately staged to make it appear as though the family had been attacked and then killed by an intruder. Upon further examination, detectives found several irregularities, including the lack of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives found that the attack was carefully planned and carried out. The attacker was a skilled shooter, missing only one shot, and had even picked up the spent bullet casings inside the house. Investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition that Dale had purchased. It was later discovered that it had been used in the murder. The home appeared to have been ransacked, but nothing valuable was missing. There was no evidence of forced entry, and the alarm, which was usually turned on, had been turned off. Investigators thoroughly examined the victims' backgrounds, searching for any clues that might be connected to their deaths. They looked into Dale's past dealings, which included selling airplanes to an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a questionable real estate transaction with Dale's brother that potentially put investors at risk of losing millions. The police thoroughly investigated and eliminated all other potential suspects with motives. Ultimately, they concentrating on Dana, as he was the one who would benefit the most from the tragic event. As the only surviving member of the Ewell family and the main beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Even though he had a solid alibi, having been with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's actions did not ease the concerns of others, but rather intensified their suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Although he outwardly showed distress and even offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, his grief seemed insincere. His reaction to the horrific killing of family members seemed surprisingly subdued, as he displayed little of the shock and sorrow that people typically exhibit in response to such a traumatic event. Instead of focusing on mourning the loss of his loved ones, Dana seemed more concerned with his parents' wills and inheritance. He did something disturbing, inviting a friend to view the house while there was still obvious blood on it, demonstrating a disregard for the victims. Furthermore, he allegedly expressed contempt for the police investigation, calling the investigators dummies who would never solve the case. Dana eluded authorities for 3 years, during which time they thoroughly investigated every lead to help solve the case. The situation worsened after Dale's brothers reported Dana to the authorities, claiming he had done something wrong. According to them, Dana became furious when he heard the will being read, as he learned that he wouldn't have full access to the $8 million estate until he was in his 30s. Dana reportedly slammed his hands on the table and screamed, asking why his father could do this to him. The trust stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he was 25, then he would receive investment dividends until he was 30. At 30, he would have access to half of the estate, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funeral, the Ewell brothers act to prevent Dana from reclaiming what he believes is his. However, Dana managed to obtain around $300,000 from an insurance policy. Dana's uncles actively prevented him from inheriting his father's assets, causing him significant frustration. Despite the growing scrutiny from investigators and accusations from his own family members that he was involved in the murder to gain control of the family estate, Dana showed no signs of worry. He continued to live a lavish lifestyle, showering his girlfriend Monica with expensive gifts and even helping with her education costs. However, it was unclear where his money was coming from. Investigators suspected that money was a key factor in the murders and dug deeper. They discovered that Dana had been stealing money from various sources, including his grandmother's trust account, which had held $400,000. By the time detectives stepped in, the grandmother was left with only $22,000 to cover her care at a nursing home. The discovery that Dana had been exploiting his grandmother for personal gain further strengthened the police's suspicions about his character. However, authorities still need concrete evidence to prove Dana's involvement in the murder. Joel, one of Dana's college acquaintances, was particularly drawn to Dana's stories of a wealthy, successful lifestyle. Joel found Dana's apparent ability to effortlessly attract beautiful women especially intriguing. People around were surprised by their friendship, as they seemed to have little in common. Dana was driven by a desire for higher social status, while Joel's interests lay in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him the opportunity to attend fancy parties and meet attractive women. Shortly after the Ewell family murders, Joel dropped out of school and soon became Dana's roommate in the Ewell family's former home. This marked a significant development in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel started making unusual purchases, such as helicopter flying lessons, despite Joel having no apparent source of income. As a result, investigators began surveilling both, monitoring their communications through pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and tapped his landline in May 1993. An officer overheard Joel discussing the investigation on a payphone, saying, "They don't have evidence, they'll try to catch you in a lie." Meanwhile, Dana continued spending lavishly, buying a new car for his girlfriend and paying her law school tuition. After using up the insurance payout, he took $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $22,000 for her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a rare 9mm assault rifle made in Colorado. Records from the company showed that a rifle had been bought by Innes Jack Pond just before April 1992. Notably, Jack was a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack first denied buying the rifle, then claimed he bought it as a birthday present for himself, and said the gun was later stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel continued to mount. At one point, detectives visited Dana at his university dorm and told him they believed Joel was responsible for killing his family. Dana stayed silent, visibly pale. After the detectives departed, Dana and his girlfriend, Monica, promptly contacted Joel's brother, Radovic, but they did not realize that they were being followed by the police. On March 2, 1995, police arrested Dana, Joel, and Peter, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had made a deal with the authorities, agreeing to testify against his younger brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. Peter confessed to the police that he had made a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He also admitted to getting rid of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes, and some gun magazines. Peter said he did these things with the help of Jack Pond. When Jack was arrested, he gave a different account of the gun. He said he bought the gun for Joel but didn't know it was going to be used for the murders. Jack also confirmed that he and Peter had disposed of evidence together. Jack received immunity in exchange for his testimony, just like Peter. As a result of statements made by Peter and Jack, the barrel of the murder weapon was found buried in a field in Rica. Unlike Peter and Jack, Dana and Joel were not offered plea deals. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, which made them eligible for the death penalty. The trial began in late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had previously been close friends and had even lived together in the house where the murders occurred, now had separate lawyers and took different stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive for the murders was greed, claiming he had promised Joel a share of the inheritance. Dana's lawyer argued that he was innocent, suggesting that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Joel's lawyer acknowledged the strong evidence against his client and focused on trying to save him from the death penalty. During the trial, Jack Pond testified that he had bought the murder weapon for Joel and helped dispose of it. He also said Joel had given him details of the incidents on the day of the murder, in April 1992. According to Jack, Dana had asked Joel for a favor that he found hard to refuse. Having taken steps to avoid leaving DNA evidence behind, Joel carried out Dana's plan by entering the Ewell residence. He shaved off all body hair and then waited 12 hours on a plastic sheet to minimize the risk of leaving any traces, including an eyelash. He was also instructed to retrieve all bullet casings. Tiffany was shot in the back of the head and died instantly, without seeing her killer. Glee, however, saw Joel and tried to escape to the office, but was shot and severely injured. Joel pursued her and eventually killed her. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel had shot Glee multiple times at close range, and that she had recognized him as a friend of Dana's who had visited the family a month earlier. After killing Glee, Joel reloaded his gun and put on new gloves, then waited for Dale to arrive, whom he also murdered. On May 27, 1998, after an 8-month trial, the jury delivered a finding Dana Ewell and Joel guilty on all charges. However, they could not agree on the sentencing. 2 votes saved Joel from the death penalty, while Dana escaped the death penalty by just 1 vote. In the end, both received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Dana was imprisoned at Corcoran State Prison, 50 miles south of Fresno. He was among inmates like Charles Manson. His grandmother, whom he stole from, died in 1999. Dana claims to have undergone a spiritual transformation and become a Christian while in prison. Joel was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Meanwhile, Jack Pond pursued a career in law, becoming an attorney. Monica Zent broke up with Dana, finished law school, and established a successful law practice. Although Monica was thoroughly investigated, no evidence connected her to the crime. The only suspicious aspects were her initial unwillingness to cooperate and that some of the funds were used to help pay for her law school expenses. Dana Ewell's actions can be summed up by 3 words: greed, entitlement, and heartlessness. His extreme desire for wealth led him to manipulate and betray those closest to him, ultimately leading to the tragic deaths of his family members. Detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970 in Indiana, United States, to a middle-class family and have a brother. From a young age, John had a strong ambition to succeed. He valued being independent and continually sought ways to better himself, as well as looking for opportunities for growth and advancement. After graduating from high school, John began searching for ways to earn money. According to his brother, John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant. However, he quit his job soon after, but the exact reason for his departure is unclear. Undeterred, John quickly found a new job that offered more freedom, allowing him to explore and develop his passion for pursuing a career in sales. John started working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family teased him, but he soon demonstrated his capabilities to everyone, and he also found his purpose in life. By the end of his first year, John had become one of the company's top salesmen, and he was eager to continue achieving more. John worked extremely long hours, typically between 12 to 16 hours a day. As a result, he became a top sales performer, earning recognition at company meetings. John's success also made him a source of inspiration and guidance for his fellow salespeople. During this time, he met Judy, a 20-year-old woman from a low-income family in Texas. Judy was born in October 1969. She was confident, extremely, and outgoing. Although John wasn't planning to hire any additional salespeople at the time, but she was able to convince John that she had what it took to achieve great success in sales. Judy's past was marked by significant life events. With her parents' consent, she had gotten married at the age of 14 and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, but it ultimately ended in divorce. When she met John, she was determined to start a new chapter in her life. John decided to give Judy a chance, taking her under his wing as a mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy prove herself as a valuable member of the sales team, but she also won John's heart. As time passed, they began to date. John's life was thriving, both personally and professionally. He has built a solid reputation for his sales and training abilities, and most importantly, he has the love and support of his wife Judy. John expanded on his experience by starting his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the industry. John's company quickly rose to the top in the area, and he credited his success to Judy's support. After establishing his career, John and Judy got married in 1992. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica. As John's business continued to thrive, they relocated to better homes, providing their children with access to excellent schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had a very good relationship with Judy's stepchildren, Christina and Daniel. Christina was a sweet girl, while Daniel was more energetic and mischievous. The family enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to John's growing wealth. He openly showcased his success to motivate the young salespeople he trained, demonstrating the potential rewards of hard work and determination. However, as Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems arose. Christina associated with a group of friends who had unhealthy habits, and as a result she started drinking with them. According to some reports, Christina has also used drugs. Meanwhile, Daniel, 13, often appears angry and doesn't seem to fit in with his friends. On one occasion, Daniel took John's car and recklessly drove around the neighborhood with friends, damaging several mailbox posts. The next day, John visited each affected house, compensating the homeowners for the damage, to prevent them from filing a police report about the boys' actions. Around this time, John was also summoned to Daniel's school that the boy had misbehaved and they needed to discuss the issue. John and Judy's relationship became strained after he got into a physical altercation with Daniel. After 9 years together, Judy took her family to Texas to visit her childhood home and meet her brother. During the trip, Judy confided in her brother about her troubled marriage and John's mistreatment of her children. However, the situation was more complex. Judy's older children were misbehaving, and she took their side, which added to the tension. Things escalated when John suspected Judy of having an affair with one of his employees. John installed cameras in the office to gather evidence. When he obtained proof of Judy's infidelity, his life was turned upside down, and his demeanor changed drastically. He began to drink heavily, which led to intense arguments with Judy and rough treatment of their children. One incident involved his daughter Tiffany, who was beaten with a belt for not bringing her homework to school. When her teacher noticed the marks the next day, she reported it to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they should say nothing about the beating. Consequently, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel. John's bad mood not only affected his family but also his employees and clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage. To keep Judy away from her lover, John moved the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite his hopes for a fresh start, things did not improve. Judy started to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, while John let himself go, growing his beard, smoking, and wearing only jeans. He became increasingly distracted. The business struggled due to John's condition, nearly going bankrupt and forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Office rumors swirled about Judy's alleged affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, fueling more arguments. At one point, Judy told John she wanted a divorce, but it wouldn't be straightforward. John felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, accepting her children, and showering her with luxuries. When love turns to resentment, he began cutting off Judy's financial sources. John made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and he had a secret recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the situation at the start of 2003. The tension between John and Judy affected the children, whose behavior worsened. Even Tiffany was grounded during the holidays for starting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The arguments finally ended on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy went out to dinner. They were likely looking for a way to resolve issues and reduce the tension between them. After dinner, the couple called home to check on their kids and told them they would be back soon. Then, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. As John and Judy left the restaurant, John decided to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late at the office. John and Judy arrived at the office, located in a deserted industrial area. Just before 10 p.m. John went inside to talk to Jeff, while Judy picked up Christina's notebook and returned to the car. A few minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side of the car to look for something. Suddenly, two loud bangs were heard, and John collapsed on the ground. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911. Police and medical units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. When questioned by the police, Judy, who was inside the car when the incident happened, was unable to provide much information. Judy said she was sitting in the car when John came out of the office and opened the back door on the driver's side. Immediately, she heard two loud shots. Judy's reaction was to hide behind the seat. When she finally lifted her head, she caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing running away from the car. Initially, it seemed like a robbery because John's wallet was missing. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they began to have doubts. John and Judy hadn't told anyone they would be there, which raised several questions. What were the chances of a random robbery in a deserted industrial are very rare. If the motive had been robbery, it's puzzling that the perpetrator would first kill John and then take his wallet. This is especially confusing since John was visibly wearing a valuable gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry. Typically, thieves would thoroughly search the victim's pockets in such situations. The fact that this didn't happen raises more questions than answers. Two bullet casings were found at the scene, which supports Judy's account of hearing two shots. One shot killed John instantly, but there's no official information about the second shot. With many unanswered questions, investigators started work taking a statement from Judy. Judy reported that her husband had argued with an employee from his company prior to the incident and identified the individual. However, she couldn't provide any additional information beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, who was inside the office, also couldn't offer any useful insights, as when he heard the gunshots and went outside, it was all over. Meanwhile, authorities informed Christina, a Parker resident, that her stepfather had passed away. With robbery ruled out as a motive, detectives turned their attention to John's circle of relatives and colleagues. They began with an employee who had allegedly argued with John, but the employee claimed they had resolved their issues amicably and had a verified alibi. The investigation expanded, include John's business partners, employees, competitors, friends, and family. Judy's behavior during the funeral surprised and puzzled many people, as she seemed cheerful and socialized with friends, which was unexpected given the circumstances. Her ex-husband was also seen casually reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after the murder, police brought in 15-year-old Daniel for questioning because he was accused of hiring gang members to kill his stepfather, John. When questioned, Daniel admitted to paying someone to hurt John, but claimed he only wanted him injured, not killed. The police arrested one of the young men that Daniel had hired, but they were released after their alibi checked out. Daniel was also released after 9 days due to lack of evidence and his status as a minor. Later, it was discovered that John had problems with Judy's children, which led to further investigation into Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and this lead also went nowhere. However, investigators were left wondering who was providing the money for these schemes, and they suspected Judy was the source. Further investigation showed that Judy and John's relationship had gotten much worse before he died, and Judy's affair was discovered. However, sources revealed that John had no plans to leave his wife and was trying to save their relationship. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband seemed to be financial gain, as detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. After John's death, Judy tried to claim this money, but the insurance company initially refused to pay due to the ongoing investigation. Receiving the insurance money becomes even more complicated when John's father suspects Judy of being involved in his son's death. Despite these leads, the case stalled due to lack of concrete evidence. Over time, the John family household underwent substantial transformations. Judy was rarely at home, as she was busy with her new partner, Jeff, who was John's trusted manager. In Judy's absence, Christina and Daniel took care of Tiffany and Erica. Later, Judy and Jeff moved out of state with Tiffany and Erica, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina, who was pregnant and had a boyfriend, stayed in the house. Although the investigation had stalled, authorities kept the case open, regularly reviewing the files in hopes of finding new leads. Their persistence paid off when they came to question some of Christina and Daniel's classmates. These schoolmates admitted to selling a firearm to Christina and Daniel. This information prompted detectives to investigate a piece of land owned by the family that Christina used for target practice. Upon inspection, several bullet casings were found. Laboratory analysis revealed a crucial clue: the bullet casings matched those from the crime scene where John was killed. In 2007, a colleague who was a narcotics officer provided additional information. The narcotics officer had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, who was involved in a drug case and was arrested, to request a lighter sentence. Christina's former boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In this conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new information, 21 years old, Christina, who was linked to the weapon used in the crime, began to cooperate. She admitted to buying the weapon and calling John and Judy on the night of the incident. She had asked them to stop by the office, claiming she needed to pick up forgotten homework. Christina confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When Daniel was 19, he was found and arrested in Arizona. Daniel was shown new evidence about the shooting and Christina's statement. He admitted to shooting John, but said his mother, Judy, was the one who planned the whole thing. Daniel said Judy had forged checks from her company to get the $7,500 to hire someone to kill John. However, when the people she hired took the money without doing the job, Judy told them to buy a gun for Daniel to use instead. Daniel also said it was Judy's idea to make up a reason for leaving the house that night by calling about homework. He said he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accident that happened while he was looking through John's pockets for his wallet, as his mother had told him to do. Daniel was also told to come back home without telling his younger sisters what had happened. His sister Christina helped by keeping the girls busy watching TV. Daniel said Judy convinced them to commit the crime by telling them they were being abused by John. And Judy promises them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also discovered that Judy had previously attempted to kill her husband. She had tried to poison his food, which resulted in John being briefly hospitalized with what was thought to be food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to conspiracy and was released on bail. In March 2008, Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to admit his guilt and testify against his mother. The prosecution agreed not to charge him with murder, but he still faced a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years. Daniel claimed that when he was 14, about a year before the incident, his mother and sister asked him to help kill John. His mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do, including showering after the crime to remove gunpowder residue. Judy took responsibility for disposing of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after John's death, Judy turned herself in and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. She admitted to planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 28 to 35 years in prison. Judy, almost 40, was sentenced to 33 years in late August 2009. Daniel was sentenced to 23 years in September, and Christina received a 5-year sentence in October. Press reports state that Daniel was released from custody in 2017. He then chose to keep a low profile. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but she tragically died from a drug overdose. This case was driven by greed. Although Judy was successful, her greater desires led her to terrible crimes. Judy's actions not only destroyed a successful business owner but also had a profound impact on her 4 children. 2 of them ended up in prison, and the younger ones were left without their parents once again. Investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Rosana Galliano. Rosana Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s to parents Raldo and Graciela. She had 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. During this time, Raldo, Rosana's father, worked as a mechanic. In 2001, Jose Arce brought his vintage car to Raldo's workshop for repairs. Jose was born on November 22, 1948. He spent more than 30 years living abroad, primarily in Greece and the United States. During his time in the United States, Jose was convicted of drug trafficking and served a 4-year prison sentence. He returned to Argentina in 1996 and owned 8 properties in a prestigious area of Buenos Aires. Despite their significant age difference, Jose and Rosana began dating shortly after meeting at her father's shop. At the time, Rosana was without a job and kept to herself, while Jose appeared to be financially stable. However, his wealth actually came from his mother, Elsa, who lived in the United States. Jose, who is 52 years old, proposed to Rosana, who is 22 years old. Rosana's mother, Graciela, expressed concerns about their significant age difference. Jose dismissed her worries, claiming that love knows no age. Rosana reassured her mother that she wanted to marry Jose, and they tied the knot on November 17, 2001, after a 7-month courtship. Jose initially thought his friendly and intelligent personality was the reason Rosana was attracted to him. They soon had a son, Geronimo. However, Jose's true nature soon became apparent, a controlling and jealous person. He frequently belittled Rosanna and her family, and has eventually turned physically abusive, leaving Rosanna feeling trapped and fearful. Jose's ownership of 2 guns added to his intimidating presence, allowing him to maintain control over Rosanna. Her family was aware of the situation and the pain it caused. Jose often flaunted his guns in front of visitors or when visiting others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house. On another occasion, Rosanna's father observed bruises on her back, bruises that she explained were caused by Jose dragging her on the ground. Rosanna and Jose had their second child, but their relationship continued to deteriorate. Jose's hot temper and lack of respect have repeatedly strained their relationship, making it difficult for her to maintain a healthy home for her children despite her best efforts. The situation was further complicated by Jose's mother, Elsa, who would visit from time to time and exert control over their household decisions. By 2006, Rosanna had suffered severe abuse at the hands of Jose and decided to report him to the authorities for domestic violence. A few months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint, this time she requesting a medical examination to document her injuries. Rosanna opened up to her sister Monica about her struggles, and they made a promise to stay connected and be there for each other whenever Rosanna needed assistance. Monica becomes Rosanna's rock, comforting and supporting her emotionally during difficult times. Whenever Rosanna visited Monica's apartment with her children, Jose would often dictate when they had to return home, threatening to harm her. He frequently belittled Rosanna, questioning her ability to be a mother. Ultimately, Rosanna decided to leave Jose and move in with Monica, leaving him to stay in their house alone. Rosanna filed another complaint and sought a divorce, which led to a restraining order being issued against Jose. As a result, they were only allowed to meet at a neutral location in El Remanso Exel de la Cruz, as arranged by the court, for Jose to visit their child. During one of her visits, Rosanna confided in Daniel Gonzalez, a married man, who worked as a gardener and lived nearby with his own daughter. Although there were rumors about a relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose continued to make threats against Rosanna, including a disturbing voicemail, in which Jose explicitly threatened to kill her, and she shared this message with her brother Oscar. In 2007, Rosanna met Oscar Lugo at a bar while socializing with friends. He was 32 years old, lived in Merino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly connected, exchanged numbers, and began dating. Oscar was a kind, attentive, and gentleman who listened to Rosanna. At 29 years old, Rosanna felt like she was rediscovering a life she had almost forgotten. However, their budding relationship was soon threatened by Rosanna's ex-husband, Jose. He closely monitored Rosanna's activities and was aware of her new relationship with Oscar. Jose wants to prevent his divorce from Rosanna and is terrified when he hears that Rosanna has started a new relationship. He offers give Rosanna a truck in exchange for ending her relationship with Oscar Lugo, but she refuses. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital. Out of desperation, Jose devised a plan with the help of his mother Elsa. They secretly planned to hire an assassin to kill Rosanna. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up Rosanna's 2 sons, aged 4 and 3, from their father Jose. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming their son Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself, but the call ended abruptly. Rosanna then sent a casual text message to Oscar Lugo at 9:53 p.m. about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again. This time, Rosanna stepped out into the garden to get better phone reception. Unbeknownst to her, a person was hiding behind the trees. As she was on the phone, the person emerged and shot Rosanna 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, who was inside, heard the shots and saw Rosanna stumble and collapse. Panicked, Monica tried to call 911 but was unsuccessful. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo tried to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m. but couldn't reach her. He then tried to call Monica but got no response. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered the property through an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was questioned by the police and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left the next day. During a thorough search of the area, a red sweater was discovered that Rosanna's family believed belonged to Jose, which led them to suspect him of the crime. The case quickly gained widespread media attention, shocking the nation and sparking a scandal. Jose and his mother publicly maintained his innocence and criticized Rosanna, claiming that she had multiple sexual partners and that they should be investigated for this crime instead of Jose. Following the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became withdrawn and isolated, refusing to speak to anyone. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo noticed Jose watching from a distance in a truck, but he did not attend the funeral or offer any condolences. Jose's defense team then shifted their focus to Monica, who was Rosanna's sister and the only witness to the case. They questioned Monica's credibility, pointing out 2 key inconsistencies in her story. Firstly, Monica did not have any blood on her clothes, which raised suspicions about her account of what happened. Secondly, instead of immediately helping her younger sister, Monica chose to run and get her phone. However, this theory lacked supporting evidence. The investigators presented a strong argument that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to handle. They also pointed out that the killer likely knew the house well, as they would have been aware that Rosanna had to go outside to get a cell phone signal. This suggests that the crime was planned in advance. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and paternal grandmother Elsa, and their grandmother Graciela was allowed to visit them. However, Monica and Oscar are not allowed near the children, as Jose expresses concern for his son's safety. Despite the court's restrictions, the children still wanted to see Aunt Monica, so Jose allowed them to visit her. During these visits, Monica took the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela was granted visitation rights to her grandchildren, though not guardianship. In an interview, Jose made some serious allegations about Rosanna, claiming she had 4 lovers who all had run-ins with the law. Jose suspects Rosanna of being involved with these men, and she has been gathering information about them for blackmail. Meanwhile, Oscar was given protection as a witness in his sister's case, which included wearing a tracking device and having a police escort. By the end of 2007, investigators still hadn't found enough evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turning point occurred in January 2008 when Jose was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. This charge was based on 3 key factors: his connection to the victim, evidence that suggested he had planned the crime in advance, and the fact that multiple people were involved in the crime. On January 28, 2008, the preliminary hearings began. At the hearings, 4 people, including Raldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar, described Jose's disturbing behavior, including his repeated use of violence and weapons to threaten others. Rosanna's mother also presented the prosecutor with the last text messages her daughter had sent before her death. The following day, Oscar Lugo, who used to date Rosanna, testified against Jose, provided testimony similar to that of Rosanna's family. According to Oscar Lugo, Jose had tried to ruin his and Rosanna's reputations by spreading false rumors. Oscar Lugo said Rosanna suspected Jose's fabrications were intended to discredit her as she and Jose were about to divorce. Opposite, Jose's lawyer disputed the claims that Jose was emotionally unstable and aggressive. On February 7, 2008, Jose's mother, Elsa, traveled from the United States to testify in a 12-hour investigative session. However, Rosanna's family began to suspect that Jose's mother might have been involved in her murder. This suspicion led Raldo and Graciela's lawyer to consider requesting Jose's mother's arrest. In response, Jose and his mother's lawyer argued that her testimony actually showed she was prioritizing her grandchildren's well-being. According to Elsa's testimony, she purchased houses for them because she believed the divorce settlement would not negatively impact them. The lawyer also denied the media's claim that Jose's mother and Rosanna had a poor relationship. Despite ongoing speculation and media coverage surrounding the circumstances of Rosanna's death, Jose was released on bail and gained custody of his children. Meanwhile, the court deemed it unnecessary to provide police protection for Oscar, Rosanna's brother, who worked as a taxi driver. However, on July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by two armed men in the early morning. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot. Fortunately, Oscar was found thanks to the protective witness tracking bracelet he wore. Oscar was deeply shaken by the event, though not severely injured. The trial next began in April 2013. Jose maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. However, in May, the trial was delayed when Jose suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict back to November 2013. The judge determined that the murder was carefully and deliberately planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. The court concluded that Jose and Elsa were involved in planning the attack. They deliberately chose the time and place to put Rosanna in a passive position and unable to defend herself. Specifically, they targeting her after a phone call would lure her outside. The court ultimately determined that Jose's primary motive for the murder was financial, because he did not want to divide the joint property with Rosanna. As a result, Jose and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The higher court upheld the conviction, emphasizing Jose's threatening behavior, the domestic violence Rosanna suffered, and the significant influence his mother had over him. Years later, in 2015, Jose and Elsa were granted house arrest due to health and age concerns, respectively. This allowed them to be reunited with their children. Throughout this time, the media continued to follow the story of the children. In January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Rosanna Galliano family thoroughly prepared their home, repainting and cleaning the house, and decorating it with balloons and a welcome sign. Graciela also cooked the children's favorite meal in anticipation of their arrival. The Rosanna Galliano home was filled with joy that weekend, as the boys spent happy time together, playing soccer and video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. However, their happiness was short-lived. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after suffering another stroke. This was a devastating blow for the children. Aunt Monica reassured them with love and calmness, promising to support whatever decision they made. The boys decided to live with Aunt Monica. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Bond Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Bond Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to report a disturbing incident. He said that a woman named Delilah had approached him and offered to hire him to kill someone. Although Mohammed did not provide Delilah's last name, the Bonn Beach police considered the information credible and began an investigation. They had to establish Delilah's full identity and find the husband she wanted to kill. With this limited information, detectives began an investigation to clarify the case and prevent a possible murder. To gather more information, the detectives decided to use the witness Mohammed to arrange a meeting with Dahlia. They chose the mobile gas station as the meeting location because, according to Mohammed, Delilah lived nearby. At the gas station, the detectives arranged several cars to monitor the meeting. Before Delilah arrived, they instructed Mohammed on what to say. They also attached a small recorder to Mohammed so they could listen in on his conversation with her. While monitoring the mobile gas station, the detectives unexpectedly witnessed a meeting between Mohammed and Delilah. Delilah's appearance made a strong impression on the detectives, as she did not resemble the usual image of someone who wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. Instead, Delilah wore a skirt and a tank top, looking very attractive. After the conversation, Delilah got into the car with Mohammed. At this point, Mohammed expressed his surprise, unable to believe that a woman like Delilah would lure him into a murder for hire. Mohammed asked Delilah if it was worth killing her husband. Delilah said yes, because she could not get a divorce. She was afraid that her husband would come after her if she tried to end the marriage. Delilah revealed her plan. After her husband was killed, she would go somewhere else, like Boca Raton, to create an alibi. Mohammed asked if anyone would suspect Delilah after her husband's death. She replied that no one would suspect her. The detectives were listening to a conversation between Mohammed and a woman. They were shocked to hear the woman calmly discussing hiring a hitman to kill her husband. This made the detectives shiver. As the conversation continued, Mohammed made specific moves on the woman. She showed Mohammed pictures of her husband so he could identify the target. The detectives were shocked by Delia's nonchalance about the consequences of her actions. She spoke so calmly that it sounded like she was discussing a normal business transaction, not planning a murder. However, detectives realized that they needed to gather more evidence to strengthen the case. She suggested to Mohammed that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and pay him later. After concluding the conversation about hiring a hitman to kill her husband, she got back in her car and left the mobile gas station. Detectives followed her home to determine where she lived. Records showed that the address belonged to someone else named Dippolito, and police concluded that she had used a false name to hire a hitman to kill her husband, not Delilah as they had previously thought. Detectives ran a background check on the car Dahlia used to go to the gas station to meet Mohammed. They found that the car's registration was held by Mike Dippolito, Dahlia's husband. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia appeared to be a happy couple in love. They met when Mike was feeling bored and looking for a way to entertain himself. He surfed the internet and found a website that offered escort services. Mike decided to book a meeting, not knowing that this decision would change his life forever. When Mike's escort, Dahlia, arrives, he is immediately enchanted by her beauty. He finds her stunning and feels an attraction between them. They instantly connect and quickly fall into intimate conversation. Over the next few days, Mike and Dahlia's relationship deepens. They meet again and spend a week together. They have a great time together, and they realize that their feelings have gone beyond friendship. From there, Mike and Dahlia officially become a couple. After a few months of dating, Mike and Dahlia's relationship takes a significant step forward. During a visit to a local jewelry store, they unexpectedly looking at engagement rings. This leads to a deep conversation about marriage, a topic they had discussed before. Fascinated by the idea of building a future together, Mike decides to buy a ring for Dahlia. It was not only a gift, but also a symbol of his commitment to the relationship. Even though their relationship was moving forward quickly, Mike was still extremely happy in love. He believed that this was the right move for both of their futures. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a criminal record in 2001. He was convicted of theft, fraud, and wire fraud in Broward County, Florida. At the time, Mike was addicted to drugs and needed money. The court sentenced Mike to 2 years in prison and 28 years of probation. This long probation period was to give Mike the opportunity to pay off his debts. When Mike first returned home from prison, he had trouble paying his debts. Determined to solve this problem, Mike took a job as a cook at a restaurant for $350 a week. However, this was not enough to pay off his large debt. Mike wanted to improve his financial situation to pay off all his debts and ensure that he did not have to go back to prison. Fortunately, a friend introduced Mike to a new job at an office near his home, just 4 blocks away. This gave Mike the opportunity to move from his job as a chef to the field of email marketing, opening up better financial prospects. When Mike and Dahlia began their relationship, Mike was honest about his difficult past and current restrictions. He explained that he could not freely travel between states without permission. Dahlia, with her strong passion for travel, expressed her desire to explore the world with Mike. Realizing that the financial burden was hindering their dreams, Dahlia proposed a bold solution. She was willing to give Mike $91,000 so that he could pay off the remaining debt. This money would help them get out of debt and start a new life, free to travel like Dahlia had always dreamed of. At that time, Dahlia was working as a real estate agent and making a lot of money. With her stable finances, she was able to help Mike pay off his debt and clear his criminal record. Mike consulted his lawyer about how to handle the situation. The lawyer advised him to prepare enough money to be released from probation. After discussing, Dahlia and Mike decided to transfer the money to Dahlia's Bank of America account because it was the safest and most convenient way. Mike's joy about paying off his debt and getting married was quickly shattered. One day, he received a text message from Dahlia informing him that she had transferred the money to his lawyer. Mike contacted the lawyer to confirm, but was surprised to be informed that they had not received any money from Dahlia. 2 days after the transaction, the lawyer still has not received the money. Mike contacts Dahlia, asking her for information about the money transfer and a receipt for verification. However, Dahlia suspects that the lawyer has misappropriated the money. She tells Mike that she will try to get the money back. Meanwhile, Mike hopes that they can resolve this misunderstanding smoothly. On the other hand, the Boone Beach Police Department enlists the help of Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover police officer. When he meets with the detective in charge of the case, Sergeant Jean is informed that Dahlia is trying to hire a hitman to kill her husband. The detective tells him that Dahlia is waiting for a call from the hitman and asks Sergeant Jean to pose as the hitman to arrange a meeting with Dahlia. Sergeant Whitey Jean agrees to participate in the investigation by posing as a hitman. In this role, he contacts Dahlia and asks her to pay $3,000 up front and the keys to her house. The request for the keys was part of a plan to make Dahlia believe that the murder would occur at her home. However, Dahlia felt uncomfortable with the request. She contacted Muhammad, who had introduced her to the hitman, to express her concerns. During a phone call between Muhammad and Dahlia, the detectives overheard and were concerned that they might have scared Dahlia. They feared that Dahlia might change her plans and find someone else to kill her husband. However, on August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean in the CVS parking lot. Sergeant Whitey was working undercover, posing as a hitman. However, Dahlia did not have any money with her. Sergeant Whitey informed Dahlia that if he waited until after the murder to be paid, she would have to pay him $7,000 in cash. Sergeant Whitey Jean announced the assassination plan on Wednesday morning, citing the cover-up as a response to looting in the area. He revealed to Dahlia that he would stage a fake break-in to give the act the appearance of legitimacy. Whitey Jean made it clear that he intended to pretend to break into the house, then shoot Mike twice in the head. Sergeant Whitey Jean informed Dahlia that he would wait a few days before contacting her again after the murder of her husband. He explained that the police would be watching her closely after such a serious crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean emphasized that this wait was necessary to avoid suspicion and to keep the case secret. During the conversation, he also gave Dahlia the opportunity to back out of the hit-for-hire plan. But Dahlia asserted that she was absolutely certain and determined to carry out the plan to kill her husband, Mike. She revealed to Sergeant Whitey Jean that Mike walked his dog at a fixed time every morning and left the house unlocked when he left. This information was key to the plan to kill Mike. Dahlia also said she would be at the gym at the time of the attack, ensuring that she would not be home when Sergeant Whitey arrived to carry out the plan. Sergeant Whitey Jean asked Dahlia to be at the gym by 6 a.m. He announced that he would be at Dahlia's house at 6:30 a.m. After finishing his conversation with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was shocked by her cruelty. Although he had met many people in his work, he had never met anyone as cruel as Dahlia. The detective thought that creating a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's house was important to see Dahlia's reaction. On the day of the attack, around 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike that she was going to work out. Mike agreed but found it strange because Dahlia had never worked out so early. However, he did not think much of it and continued with his normal morning routine. The detective followed and confirmed that Dahlia had gone to the gym. This provided the evidence the detective needed to continue with his plan. However, before he could proceed with setting things up at Mike and Dahlia's house, the detective needed to inform Mike of the current situation. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left the house to go to the gym, there was a loud knock on the door. Mike rushed to open the door and was surprised to see a group of police officers standing in front of the house. He was shocked and confused and asked what was going on. A detective walked in and told Mike some shocking news. His wife had hired a hitman to kill him. However, the hitman was actually an undercover cop assigned to expose Dahlia's plot. The detective further explained that the whole situation was an elaborate plan set up to catch Dahlia in the act of hiring a hitman to kill her husband. Mike was shocked when the police came to his house and informed him that his wife, Dahlia, had hired a hitman to kill him. After calming down, the detectives emphasized the urgency of the situation and asked him to leave the house immediately. They quickly took Mike to the police station for safety. The detectives created a fake crime scene at Mike and Dahlia's house. They put up police tape and turned on the police car lights to make it look like a real crime scene. After they were ready, a detective called Dahlia and told her that the police were at her house and needed to talk to her about a matter involving her husband. The detective asked Dahlia to come home and answer some questions. After speaking with the detective, Dahlia returned home and was shocked to find that her house had become a crime scene. Police tape surrounded the house and police cars were parked everywhere. When Dahlia asked the detective about the situation, she was informed that the police had received a report of a murder at her house, accompanied by gunshots. The detective then gave her the shocking news that a search of the house had turned up the body of her husband, Mike. This information shocked Dahlia. She burst into tears as soon as she heard the news of her husband's death. However, the detective, who was experienced in announcing the death, noticed that Dahlia's reaction was unusual. Although she appears to be crying, the detective does not see any tears on her face at the police station. The detective begins the investigation by asking Dahlia about the people who may have been involved in her husband's death. The detective's goal is to get Dahlia to admit that she hired someone to kill her husband. The detective tells Dahlia that her husband was shot twice in the head and died. Dahlia is confident that Mike will not open the door to strangers. She explains that Mike is currently on probation for securities fraud and is trying to complete his probation. However, this is difficult because the community is not supportive of Mike's upcoming release due to the amount of debt he owes. Despite this, Dahlia insists that their marriage is stable. During the investigation of Mike's husband's murder, the police interrogate her. Mike watches the interrogation from another room. The detective informs Dahlia that they have the facts of the case and will begin investigating. They then led Sergeant Whitey Jean into the room, handcuffed, and asked Dahlia if she knew him or had met him before. Dahlia firmly denied any connection to Sergeant Whitey Jean. After the police escorted Sergeant Whitey Jean out of the room, the detective informed Dahlia that she was under arrest for attempted murder. The detective further explained that the man Dahlia had hired to kill her husband was actually an undercover police officer. As a result, Dahlia was arrested for her crime. While Dahlia was in custody, the police allowed Mike, Dahlia's husband and the victim of the attempted murder, to see her. When Dahlia saw Mike, she tried to call him back, but Mike refused, saying that he could not help her in this situation. In fact, Mike wanted Dahlia to admit to plotting to kill him, but she still firmly denied her actions. On April 26, 2011, Dahlia DiPolito's trial was held in Palm Beach County District Court. Dahlia was charged with conspiring to hire someone to kill her husband, Mike. During the trial, Mike testified against his wife. He testified for 3 consecutive days. Dahlia's defense attorney argued that the plan to kill Mike was just a publicity stunt for a reality television show. They claimed that Mike had agreed to participate and helped orchestrate the plot. However, Mike denied all things. He claimed that he had no knowledge of or involvement in any such plan. Mike stated that he had no interest in participating in a reality television show and would never waste money or put himself in danger for that purpose. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for hours and ultimately found Dahlia guilty of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm. When the verdict was announced, Mike had mixed feelings. He was relieved that Dahlia was serving a 20-year prison sentence, a fair sentence for her serious crime. At the same time, he was relieved that he could finally move on with his life, knowing that justice had been served. After Dahlia was convicted of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm, her lawyers appealed. They argued that the jury's verdict had been influenced by an unofficial tip. Specifically, a juror had commented that Dahlia had tried to poison Mike's Starbucks drink. However, this information was never introduced into evidence at trial. By law, juries are only allowed to evaluate evidence that is formally presented in court. As a result, the Court of Appeals overturned Dahlia's conviction and decided that she was entitled to a new trial. Mike was surprised to learn that there would be a second trial for Dahlia, even though she had been convicted of conspiring to kill him. In December 2016, the state held a second trial, believing that they had enough evidence to prove that Dahlia had incited her husband to kill her. However, the outcome was not as expected when the jury could not reach a consensus. Ultimately, the judge decided to hold a new trial. Dahlia faced a third trial in June 2017. After the trial, it took the jury just 90 minutes to reach a final verdict. They found Dahlia guilty and sentenced her to 16 years in prison. In September 2019, Dahlia Dito asked the Florida Supreme Court to review her 2017 conviction. However, the court denied the request without comment. After Dahlia was convicted, her defense team attempted to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court for review. However, in February 2020, the court declined to take it. Despite this, Dahlia DiPolito's attorneys told the press that they were undeterred and were still determined to overturn the conviction. They revealed plans to petition a federal judge for a third review of Dahlia's trial on constitutional grounds. The attorney said this was Dahlia's last chance to secure a new trial. Despite serving her sentence, Dahlia was respected in prison for her strong faith. She organized a Bible study group in prison, which was praised by her fellow inmates. Before going to prison, Dahlia had a young son who visited her regularly. The boy is now living with his grandmother until Dahlia completes her sentence. According to her lawyer, the separation has been heartbreaking for Dahlia because she misses her son very much.